Today, as part of our continuous study on a comparison between the Bible and the Koran, I want to focus on violence. Many people have said all kinds of things, and we have to be careful and study before we say anything. So I want to invite you to remember, first of all, what is in the Bible and what is in the Koran. We know that the Bible, and today we are talking particularly concerning the Old Testament, or the Tanakh in Hebrew. That is a collection of books, and you have books that are more symbolic, or so, like Genesis, but there are several of those books that are historical. For example, the book of Joshua, the book of Judges, the two books of Samuel, and the two books of Kings are historical books. They may not be completely accurate, but they are historical books. So they have to be read as such. It's a story about something that happened in time. And those books were written in the 7th century and 6th century before Christ. Between 600 and 586 before Christ. So a long, long while ago. And this doesn't compare with the Koran that was written 6 centuries after Christ. Now those books of the Bible that I mentioned are historical books. And the stories, the events that they allude to or they describe happened in the Bronze Age. It's generally accepted that they happened in between 2000 and 100 and 1550 before Christ. So a long, long time before Christ. That is the second part of the Bronze Age. And you have to put those stories back into context. And we know that at the time, war was occupying people basically every year, all the year round. As soon as the climate became better, as spring came, then people started war. That was a normal thing to happen. And we have to look at this in comparison, in context. So when we hear about wars, and you read these wars, you see that quite a number of them were retaliation. So the Hebrews were attacked, and they replied. They went into war as a result of an attack. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they were instructed to go into war and slaughter people. And you have to remember that this was in a context where it happened normally. So much that at a point, kings were captured, and they were asking to be slaughtered because they said that otherwise it would be shame. They were used to it. The times were rough and violent. But we see that this was placed in history. It was never meant clearly that those books were for today's age. It was a story that happened in the past, that was said so people will learn about the relationship between Israel and God. And that is the way we should look at it. God never told people today or yesterday to kill people and massacre them. This was in the Bronze Age, And this is something that happened long ago. And the purpose of it at the time was to teach people that you have to be separate. You cannot intermingle with people that believe something else, because those people of God had to be trained to worship God, because they were coming from polytheism. They had no idea who was God. And God revealed himself to them gradually. And we know that Jesus said in the New Testament that all these laws and all the things that happened before were for their learning, and that God knew, as he explained, that they were not able to understand. And that's why, for example, if you look at the timeline, that at a point God allowed people to be polygamous, but then Jesus came at a point and said, now we have reached the point where you have to adhere fully to my laws, to God's laws that are one man, one wife. And the disciples said, oh, but we thought that it was polygamous before. And Jesus said, yes, it's because you were not able to understand it that time. That gradually God was bringing his people closer and closer to him, and closer to his pleasure. So violence has to be understood in that time frame, that timeline. And the Bible never encourages killing. Jesus said, pray for your enemies, love your enemies. And he himself, when he was arrested, didn't do anything to defend himself. In fact, when Peter cut the ear of the servant of the high priest, Jesus healed his ear. Another point where we see horrible things is in the Psalms, some of the Psalms. For example, Psalm 137 verse 9. Those Psalms were written around between 586 and 330 BC, before Christ. So at that time, Jesus was not known. People were used to God and the ambient violence. And the way the psalmist expressed himself was, oh, these people have done so bad for me. And that's what the psalms usually say. You know, these people have done bad to me. They have tried to kill me. Please, God, let them suffer the way they made me suffer. And that was the law at the time, was eye for an eye, tit for tat. An eye for an eye, an ear for an ear, you know. Just the way they do, then we retaliate. And that's what we see in the wishful thinking of some of the Psalms. It was not a prayer meant for today, because we have gone a long way since those days. If you compare that with the Koran, then you know that the Koran is not a historical book at all. It's a compilation of commands. Do this, don't do that. And when the Quran tells his followers, kill, slaughter, that is a command, and they are exactly doing that today, because there is no caveat. Once they are not believers, kill them. That's what the Quran says. And of course, I send you back to the previous videos for the details of this. But I wanted to make clear the difference between a historical book and a command from the 7th century that is still applicable today in that religion there. Bless you.